In life's journey, we must seek to reflect, learn, and grow. Welcome to the Road to Rediscovery with your host, Aubrey Johnson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Road to Rediscovery. I'm your host, Aubrey Johnson, and I am so excited to have you here with me. The Road to Rediscovery is about reflecting on life lessons to learn and grow from them, and to take things to the next level and help others who are struggling through dark times. Now, you can ask just about any successful person how they're able to continuously raise the bar and stay relevant, right? And they'll tell you that they're always challenging the status quo and they stay curious. They'll also mention the importance of cultivating that mindset throughout their teams, thus establishing a culture. My special guest has tremendous insight on this. She's a builder of communities and a process-driven problem solver, helping people continuously improve to reach their fullest potential. Before starting her own business, she helped build the largest Lego-inspired STEM company in the United States. She's also worked with the likes of Google, LinkedIn, Netflix, and a host of others to build a community of inclusion and create psychologically safe work environments where teams can thrive. Also known as the Cultivator of Curiosity, let's welcome Lauren Yee to the show. Hey, Lauren, how are you? Oh, no, absolutely. Thank you. Oh, the crowd still loves you. All right. So let's just go ahead and dig into it. If you can just open up by sharing with the listeners a bit of your background, where you're from, and so forth.
Let's see. As Cliff Notes version as I can be. So I am a Californian. I've always been there, but I've traveled around, lived in multiple places within the large state that it is. And in terms of my pathway and road to where I'm at now, I went to school, wanted to be an architect, did some design work, worked in that field for several years, and actually was a lead designer and project manager for a well-known general contractor and designer down in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And that's like the dream job, you think?
The dream job.
Then it wasn't, though. And then my road kind of switched, and I stumbled into a different job where I got to play more and be curious and learn, and grew from there and stayed with that company for 8 years, which I didn't mean to go there. And I sort of just ended up staying because I liked it. And I never thought that I would have been in a field of education management and learning.
Yeah.
But that's where I ended up. And then I've since left that and have started new companies and things and want to help other people do good stuff.
Nice. Good stuff, man. Thank you so much for sharing that, Lauren. I mean, that's a great Cliff Notes version of a glimpse into who Lauren Yee is, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. So obviously you, as we all do growing up, we have exposure to community, right? Our first encounter with community and what it is. And then obviously a community in your schools, a community in your workplace, right? Community in your sorority or fraternity, if you join those organizations. So, how and when was the first time that you realized your passion for community, where you were actually mindful and saying, this is a great community, or this is a community I think I can add value to?
So that's a really interesting question, because it definitely takes a bit of reflection, not just I'm part of one, but I can affect what's around me. And I think that probably the most formative time that happened for me was in college.
Okay.
I was at my university, and I was part of a like Polynesian Hawaii club situation. It
Hmm.
was a social club, but also cultural. So it was mostly, meet new people and hang out, but
Yeah.
we learned dances. We talked about the culture. We put on an annual luau with the food and costumes and all the stuff.
Hmm.
So that was something that I didn't know my first year at the university, and I saw them, and I was like, that looks like fun. I want to do that. And then I joined, and I was just a member for the first year, but then I was a co-president and then president in the following years that I was there.
Right.
And it was just something that once I was in it, there was like a warm, fuzzy feeling of just, I want to be in this. I want to do more.
Yeah.
I want to stay connected with these people, and I feel it back.
Mm-hmm.
I think that something with that is just it's a two-way street, right?
Right.
The community, I care about you and you care about me, and there's sort of like a safety in that,
Mm-hmm.
and just wanting to do better for each other, and
Yes.
feeling that in that environment, in a pretty contained, because it's a club,
Right.
so like you all do your own things and you're in different majors and live in
Yeah.
different places, but then you see each other a couple times a week and you're aiming towards this goal. So
Mm-hmm.
it's more contained than in the larger quote unquote real world.
Sure.
But,
Yeah.
I think that gave me a real sense of, what community is capable of.
Yes. And thank you for sharing that, because, when we say community, or we say culture, right? People look for tangible things to say, okay, this is a community because of this, something I can see, touch, hold. This is a culture because of this. But we're talking about the intangibles, right?
Yeah.
The intangibles in which, in your heart of hearts, you feel those intangibles, whether it's support, encouragement, someone who cares about you, and they feel it from you. So there's a degree of energy too that is passed from person to person. Like you said, it's a two-way street, right?
Absolutely. You actually bring up a really great point of,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when we try to think about a community, it's usually rooted in something, like you said, tangible or nameable, where it's like a neighborhood or
Right.
a church group,
Right.
or this club or your work team.
Yeah.
Who, like, it's a obvious labelable thing or group of whoever.
Yeah.
But the thing that creates the culture or energy that makes it feel like an actual community, or, where you're like, my friends are my family, like getting to that feeling,
Yeah.
are the intangible things of trust and respect and support, right, and caring. And
Yes.
those things aren't something that you can just turn on.
No.
I mean, you can, in the sense, but it's not going to change overnight. It takes time, mm-hmm, and commitment and consistency, mm-hmm, to get people to feel on the same page, because right, it takes more than one interaction to convince somebody or change somebody's mind, or to get somebody to understand where you're coming from, usually.
Yeah, no, that is true. And it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes.
These are things that people must be patient with. And, this kind of reminds me of something that I have recently gone through. Now, I live in North Texas, but I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. And 6 years ago, I moved down here as a result of my company. Okay. And so our company decided to make Plano, Texas, its North American headquarters. And so there was a group of us that came from the Midwest to move here. And there was a group of people from our other organization in Southern California to move here. And we were to coexist in a work environment under one roof. Okay. So if you can just, picture this, Lauren, you have behaviors and you have habits and you have just the way people work together in the Midwest coming to one place. And then you have people who are of a Southern California mindset, and their ways of working and their behaviors and the way they communicate coming to North Texas. And so, even though we're the same company, I kind of believe there were like almost two different cultures, of patterns and behaviors and habits that came together that we had to find some sort of alignment. Have you ever seen anything like that with clients that you've worked with?
All the time.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because there's it's complicated and simple
Yeah.
in that community is a thing. Community can have a feeling, but
Right.
also the complexity of it is that kind of like you're talking about with locations.
Yeah.
I'm from California. There's so many microclimates, right? So
Yes.
within a community, there's still, I don't want to go so far as call them cliques, but it's just like if you're working at a company,
Yeah.
there's teams that you just work within your
Yeah.
own departments,
Right.
and how they function within each other and how they talk to each other
Yes.
separately versus together
Right.
is maybe not different. Maybe they're not speaking the same languages or on the same timelines.
Yes.
In regular non-work life, it's
Yeah.
the same thing of my experience is different than your experience. My experience is different than my sister's experience. Right?
Right. Yeah.
So we're closer than others, but we still have our own versions of what we're bringing to the table. And
Yes.
so much of it is, there's a phrase that I feel like I've been saying a lot lately, which is, do you want to be right or do you want to understand? And the understanding part is the point of coming together and being able to meet people where they're at, or being willing to meet people where they're at.
Right.
And hopefully it's reciprocated as well.
Nice.
That's like what I think is a really great foundation.
Yes.
For things to actually flourish. Otherwise, it's a little bit a bumpier road.
Right. Yeah. It would be a little more bumpy than if you did go that route. So, all right, great. So you have worked with clients in which you've seen this type of challenge, and you help them to strategically develop a plan and a way to align as part of that community, part of that culture. So it is a psychologically safe work environment where people know that they have each other's backs and no one's out to railroad the other. Right? Is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
in a generalized sense.
Yeah.
Like what we've talked about of it's psychological and the thinking and what you're coming to the table with.
Yes.
In a much more general way, the thing that matters for any group that you're talking to is that understanding piece. We've talked about how I've claimed Cultivator of Curiosity because I feel like that's so much of how you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's about asking questions and wanting to understand,
Yes.
Versus just saying your piece and being ready to argue with someone versus understanding where they're coming from, why they don't understand what you're saying. Maybe the fact that you aren't talking about the same thing, or you are just in different words.
Yeah. Yeah.
Communication is clearly very important.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these are all very umbrella topics that will matter in different ways to different people and groups and things like that.
Yeah.
But those are the guideposts or values of how to community build, and just whether it's community or just working together.
Yes.
At least a little bit.
Yes. Yes.
Those are the big things that lead to everything else, I think.
Nice. Awesome. So let's talk about that name for a minute. Cultivator of Curiosity. Right. I love the name, first of all, but just for my clarity and the clarity of the listeners, when we say the name Cultivator of Curiosity, is it double faceted? In other words, could that possibly mean, say, you have a lot of curiosity, and so when you're working with clients, you're asking a lot of questions so that you can understand, okay? And does it also mean that in working with your clients and people in teams and groups, you teach them to be curious so they can seek to understand? And seeking to understand, like you said, is what people need to have, and it has to be reciprocal in order for them to be cohesive, right? So,
Yeah.
So the Cultivator of Curiosity, does it mean both things?
I like to think so.
Okay, great.
Because I do think that I'm a a naturally curious person.
Yeah.
Whatever someone's going to tell me, I feel like I tend to have several follow-up questions because I want to understand. And
Right.
I have a very logic process-oriented brain. So I'm just like, well, how did that detail fit into this? And then
Yes.
what does that mean?
Yes.
Just because I want to understand the bigger picture of
Yes.
whatever you're telling me, whether it's we got a dog and like you live in New York and you have no outside space. Like, is it a big dog? Is it a little dog?
Right,
or
right.
if it's a bigger, our company is trying to do this thing and we're hitting this criteria, like whatever it is, I want to understand the bigger picture. So I have a lot of questions because I want to learn and I'm curious. I try not to have it go too far into like interrogation style.
Right. Yeah.
Because I want to learn and understand where you're coming from. So that's my side of it. But I do think that I do want to also cultivate curiosity in others.
Yes.
And some of that is teachable because so much in life is a practice.
Right.
And there's so much that's knowledge, but there doesn't always feel like application. So
Yeah.
that's a great self-help book, but I don't know what to do with this now. So some of it is practice and some of it is, for me, when I come into these situations, it's a leading by example sort of a thing.
Gotcha.
And community culture wise, I also strongly believe that like leading by example, it's just if I ask a question, not to be right, but to understand,
right,
I'm creating a space for you to give me an answer.
Yes.
That is not quote unquote right or wrong. It's just an answer.
Right.
And we're going to go from there. And that can really open gates of communication for people to feel like they can actually say things or can actually speak up or can actually share a deeper part of a story that they might not. But if you ask the question, they're thinking, oh, you actually want to know.
Right.
Because I also feel like in this world, I'm kind of jumping further away for a minute, but we've gotten a lot of like second nature automatic response, like how is it going?
Yeah.
Fine. Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to like, oh my gosh, everything's terrible in this.
No.
Not nobody wants to know, but nobody's going to say that.
No, they're not.
Not from the get-go, at least.
No. It's like a rubber stamp. Oh, I'm fine.
Yeah. It's just like the present here. Good.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually, it has come to not actually mean what you're saying.
You can't engage that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if I were to say like, hey, how's it going? And you're just fine. But I'm just like, well, like, cool. Like, how's your family? Like,
Yes.
How's the job? Like, what are you up to lately? What are you looking forward to? It's more questions, but I'm giving you an opportunity to give me a real answer.
Yes.
Instead of the automatic fine. Meh,
Right.
good.
Right. Love it. No, thank you for emphasizing that point, Lauren. I mean, that is truly, valid, right? I mean, this is something that's relative that people do today. I mean, hey, how's it going? How's your day going? Oh, it's okay. Fine. And it's not really engaging. And part of our work that we do in trying to help people learn how to, interact with each other. I'm sure you do this as well, is to teach them and show them how to change their mindset in the way they respond when someone says, "How are you doing?" Right? And the person who's asking it, don't just ask it as a matter of routine. Be truly, genuinely interested in how they are doing. Right?
Absolutely. There's also even individual, if you don't necessarily have the quote unquote power, if you don't feel like you can change a culture,
yeah,
like I'm just part of this, and my boss or the leader of this group, whatever. There are versions of doing that too, where there's little ways, right?
Yeah.
A different version when we used to be able to meet new people.
Yeah.
At events that are more virtual now.
Uh-huh.
But there's also the other question of like, nice to meet you. What's your name? Where are you from?
Right.
I don't know how much people do they care or not. Where are you from? What do you do for a living? Or like, what do you do? Like, what do you do? And sometimes people care.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just feels like these are the questions that I'm supposed to ask to get to know you.
Right.
And I sometimes have gone the route of, I'll answer. I'm not trying to be sneaky and get around questions or try to be funny or anything like that. But, when people might ask you like, oh, like, what do you do? Like, what do you do? Well, I really like to draw, and
There you go.
like
That's
I
right.
like to go for a walk sometimes when it's nice,
Yeah.
but I don't know if it's too hot.
Those are things you do.
And that's I'm not answering their question, but it's also almost challenging the status
Yes.
quo of,
Yes.
because if someone's just like, oh, I'm an accountant, like how much do you have to say back to that most of the time? Like not a
Right.
lot. It's just a fact, but it doesn't invite conversation or
A
understanding
further
or
dialogue.
learning. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
it's like the pulling teeth of like question answer,
Gotcha.
but we want deeper answers.
Yes. Something more meaningful, thoughtful, right?
Yeah, rather than like the
Yeah.
Scantron test, we want like a fill in the blank test.
Totally. Totally. Sweet. So, obviously, in starting your business, it doesn't come without challenges. It doesn't come without obstacles. Can you share with the listeners um, your mindset in overcoming these challenges? Obviously, I don't know, with some people, when they're met with the challenge, it's this big sigh. And then from there, they just kind of shake it off and then have a mindset for resolve, right? Um, uh, Share with the listeners, if you can, your mindset in meeting those struggles and those challenges when starting your business, and the I guess the way of thinking or the pattern of thinking that you had to adopt in overcoming those challenges.
I'm going to actually reference my childhood for a second,
Okay.
because I feel like I was, both of my parents are no longer around.
Okay.
But I learned a lot from them and love them still,
Yes.
and was lucky enough to glean enough from them in their time that they were here.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up, my dad had a phrase that he would often say, which is, it is what it is. But it wasn't ever like a, oh, well feeling. It was
Right.
more
Right.
of a moving forward version. Like, well, it is what it is. And like,
Right.
he wouldn't say it, but like, now what?
Yeah. Now what? Right.
Like, we kind of like joke, like it could be like whatever you come to him with, he'd just be like, well, what are you going to do now? Like, it's not, there's nothing that you can change about what happened.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of having that in my life has helped me be a curious person and be able to sort of meet challenges with a curiosity and possibility versus it being a harrowing experience of, oh, this huge hurdle. It's like, yes, it's a hurdle, but I can't change that. So what are the options that I have?
Right.
And it's a hard thing. It takes, like everything, it takes practice.
Yes.
But trying to consider things as, again, it sounds so bad when you're like, oh, this terrible thing or this terrible challenge is here, but it's an opportunity. Like, I'm just going to see it as an opportunity. That's a hard switch to make. But
it is.
So in terms of labeling it that way, maybe it's not that, but thinking about it in the sense that you can't change what it is. So what can you do to move forward? Yes. It reminds me of a thing that I've been talking to with some people about how, to me, curiosity is about learning and questions.
Yes.
And when you're a kid, I feel like I reference being a kid a lot because there's so much about your brain as a kid that I just want to bring back into the world or into the adult world.
Yeah.
When you're a kid, you go through that time in your life, right? That's the why is that? Why? And then the adults are like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I want to almost have people bring that back because that why curiosity is the questions for learning, questions for future, questions to bring shape to something that's going to help you moving forward.
Right.
I feel like because of the way we've gotten through life to adulthood, and that's kind of been smashed down a little bit, when we tend to ask questions, it feels like it's more negative or the rumination backwards version. Like, why didn't I do that? If only I said that. You can't change that though. So going forward, thinking like, okay, how could I have done this differently for the next time versus just sitting in the past part? Because that, it's good for reflection for the future, but to live in the past isn't really going to help you progress.
Not at all.
If you don't make that shift at a certain point.
Right.
And I think that like that awareness,
Mm-hmm.
like taking a deep breath and being like, okay, ask yourself a question. Like, is that question helpful for moving forward?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
sometimes it is and sometimes it's not.
Right.
Sometimes it might be somewhere in the middle, but like, can you shift it one way versus sitting in rumination and like in a dark cave versus
Right.
to curiosity for future thought, for moving
Yes.
forward, for progress, and like
Yes.
go to the light.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like that it really is in questions and what are you questioning? Like the I don't know if it's the object of the questions, but what's the point of your question?
Right. The point of the question, and having that curious mindset. When faced with adversity, you start thinking about, okay, what are my options? How can I manage this? Is it something I can control? Is it something that I can't control? What do I need to do to move on from it? Right.
Yeah.
And that curious mindset, it sounds like, from what your father has mentioned by saying it is what it is in such a way to say, look, accept what you can't control
Mm-hmm.
and have a plan to move on. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that is awesome. Awesome. And you know what? That is valuable, very valuable pieces of information that you just shared with the listeners, Lauren. And I want to thank you for that because, we have a lot of the listeners are really, kind of like sometimes just like all of us, we get in a rut, and
Yeah.
when we're in a rut and we have like a lot of different challenges from different facets or areas of our life, and it's to the point where all of them are a priority now, it's easy to get overwhelmed,
Yeah.
and so it's hard for some people to have a way or have a solution, in responding to, mountainous piles of despair and adversity and challenges. And so this gives them a great strategy or plan in addressing, the obstacles and challenges they've had. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah. I do. I love questions. One other actually thing that I'll mention about that
Yeah.
because it you want to ask yourself questions from time to time, just deep breath, like what am I trying to do?
Yeah.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Is a general basic one.
Right.
But also I think something that can try to shift your mindset, because again, it's hard to just be like, I'm positive now.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's not how that works. It takes practice. I think
Mm-hmm.
that um, like I mentioned about like negative versus positive or rumination versus
Right.
forward thinking curiosity.
Right. Yeah.
I think that even though it's kind of positive, sometimes positive thinking comes out negatively, which sounds like a weird thing. But my example being when you are wanting to try something new, whether it's just, I want to take a trip somewhere or I'm going to go to this job interview or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And you're nervous and you're talking to friends or something like that, or
Yeah.
maybe a friend is talking to you,
Mm-hmm.
trying to shift your words ever so slightly, because often the phrase that we like lean into or go towards is what's the worst that could happen.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
that's like, well, the worst thing that could like things come crashing down and it's it's terrible. You're asking me to
Yeah.
think about the worst.
Yeah.
But you could also, it's like, what's the best thing that could happen?
Right.
Both of those are very real possibilities. It's like a coin flip in the sense of what you're asking or
Yeah.
what your answers can be, but they're like
Right.
the opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And there's connections that can happen in your mind too, where if you're saying what's the worst that can happen, you're thinking about all the bad things and it's making you nervous. And then you're like, even subconsciously,
Yeah.
then looking for them. But if you think like, what's the best thing that could happen? Or how could this get any better? Then you're trying to think of all the good things. And even though you might not be actively thinking it, when you sort of prime yourself that way,
Yeah.
you're more prepared to see the good or be ready for opportunities rather than all the scary hurdles.
Sure.
In
Sure.
that way, when you're asking yourself or helping somebody else and they're asking you,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's another little way to just even be aware of, even if you don't change it right away, just noticing when you say like, oh, it's the worst that could happen. You're like, oh, I said worst.
Yeah, it gives you that negative connotation a little bit. But like you said, awareness is the key.
Yeah.
Having awareness is definitely the key. So, wanted to ask you a question regarding a team's culture, or a group's culture, or maybe, the environment that they work in. So how does a team's culture, or the work environment, um, how does that contribute to the team's productivity and meeting their goals and objectives? Uh, I hope that makes sense. If it's a good
Yes.
culture,
Okay.
does that have an impact on productivity and meeting objectives versus a bad culture, or does one impact the other?
I definitely think that it does.
Yeah, yeah,
Because I mean, we're full humans, and I can compartmentalize some things if I need to, but
yeah,
it's hard to separate feelings from work, from like things that happened in the
right.
past. So we're even though we can separate that a little bit, it's really hard to. So being
Mhm.
able to be in an environment where you feel supported, cared for, respected,
Yes,
trust, like all of those hopefully good feelings,
hmm,
where your team culture or climate, because I feel like it is like a cross section. Culture is really
yes,
hard to define because it's so many things and it could
right.
change from one week to another.
Hmm.
So it's kind of how it's all building from day to day to day. And if you, in terms of like, if we're going work culture, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because that's when a bunch of different people are coming together from different
hmm,
households and different teams and all that stuff.
yeah,
If you don't trust your manager or supervisor,
hmm,
it's really hard to like get work done when they're telling you something and you're just like, this is a stupid idea.
right,
Like, I know
right.
better. I'm the one doing this work and you're telling me this thing and it doesn't make sense. But if you can't communicate upwards and they're telling you without asking questions and just everyone's assuming that this is the way it has to be,
Yeah, yeah,
everyone's just angry because it's not getting done, but you're trying to get it done, but you know that it's redundant and
yes,
it stagnates things. If there's a what I view to be a better culture, which stems on communication, is a big
yes,
one, and
yes,
that then builds trust, respect, all of that stuff.
yes,
Um, then if like in that same scenario, if a manager is telling you, hey, I need you to do this thing, and you're the one on the ground being like, that doesn't make sense.
yeah,
If
yeah,
it's a safe enough culture, you would feel safe enough,
yeah,
respected enough to speak up and maybe
yes,
say, I hear you and I
hmm,
can definitely do that. However,
right,
A, B, C, this actually is going to take much longer than if we did it this way.
right,
What are your thoughts? And if you
yes,
don't feel like you can speak up at all, you're stuck in that first scenario. But if you
right,
can speak and feel like you're not going to get in trouble for saying anything,
right,
work can move potentially faster or better, because sometimes there are disconnects in what people know or understand about something that you're talking about or
oh,
something that you're
sure,
trying to get done,
yes,
especially in the sense of at work when there's leadership and folks on the ground doing the work.
hmm,
Everybody thinks they know, but from one direction, either up or down, it's not always clear. You don't always have all the information. And if
right,
you can't talk about it, or if you're not allowed to question it because you're going to get like thrown under a bus or
yeah,
like get potentially yelled at, or you're afraid there's going to be some bad negative thing coming your way,
yeah,
you're not going to speak up, and then it's just angry, and when you're angry you're distracted by that, so you can't even do your work anyway.
yeah, yeah,
So I and then I'll also mention at the Lego learning through play using Lego company that we were working at,
hmm,
I when I managed one of our areas, I had like 16 staff under me who
okay,
were running programs and things like that. And I think so much of it was that it takes time and you have to start somewhere, but being able to have open communication and convincing your staff or your team or whoever, your peers, whoever, that you're
right,
coming from a place of understanding and not, I need to be right,
right, correct,
matters.
yeah,
Because if a problem occurs and they don't want to tell you because they are afraid. That's not good, because then you just don't know. Or if they are willing to tell you, you then have at least the choice to be right or understand.
Right.
And one example that I can think of this is I would always be like, okay, well, tell me what happened. All of my curious questions. Tell me the whole story. I'm going to ask you some more questions so that I understand where you're coming from.
Sure.
And then I can problem solve with how we can move forward. I can't change what you did, but we need to make a choice moving forward, and I need all the information.
Totally.
One of the, I don't know if it's the worst, but one of the worst things that I feel like can happen at companies is when people ask if something bad happens, and the first or one of the first questions is, well, whose fault is it? You're like, that's not helpful.
It's not.
That doesn't change anything, except for maybe someone's going to get fired, but no one's going to learn from it. Everyone's just going to be scared. You didn't figure out anything about moving forward. You just decided whose fault it was.
Yeah.
And so that it can have so many problems because, again, it breaks down communication and trust, which does not flow well with all of those things to actually make things happen.
Right.
Which was a lot in one go.
No, I got you. I mean, in an environment like that, fear kind of sets in, and so does blame, maybe, when it comes to the focus being on whose fault it is versus having a solution-oriented mindset, right?
Yeah, it's all the bad versions of office politics.
Yes,
because office politics get a really bad name. Because it's usually all you're like, oh, it's like the gossip and like the favorites and like the meetings that are before and after meetings and like secret promotions and that, like, it gets all that bad sort of cloud. Yeah. But office politics in and of itself is like the stuff that happens that are like less structured. And there's positive versions of that too, where like, if I talk to you, I know what you're working on. I know what your issues are and I can help you, or I know that you're interested in something. So I know to consider you when if there's a job opening, I'm like, hey, so-and-so, I know you were interested in this. Right. There's good versions of office politics too. It's just usually overshadowed.
No, I got you. Okay. Yeah, it is usually overshadowed for sure. And working in an office, the years that I have, including now, except I'm working from home, I've seen that firsthand for sure. So speaking of working in an office and in companies and organizations, I would love to hear your thoughts on a company that has a mission, or a company that has a vision statement. As you know, there's a lot of companies that operate on a mission or guiding principles, or they have a vision statement, right? One is more longer term than the other. One is more action oriented, but are good missions and vision statements written in a way that references culture and community?
I think this is a multifaceted answer and question. I feel like you said, to me, at least in how I'm thinking about it, and maybe you think about it differently, other people think about it differently. But when I think about a vision statement, it is much more end goal. Like, we're trying to do this. Yeah. This is the thing we're trying to do or fix or help. Right. Which is good. Mm-hmm. But it's the what. Mm-hmm. And the values part is the how.
Right.
Which, to me, the how speaks more to culture, if you will, hopefully.
Okay. Yeah.
And it depends on if they're actually following said values.
Sure. Yeah.
Say like, yes, it's quote unquote culture, but if they're not really doing it, then it's just words there.
And it's defeating the purpose of the vision or mission statement, right? Because that is made to align, get everyone on the same page,
right?
What this company is about.
What are we doing? Right. How are we getting there?
That's right. Yeah.
And I think that together, those because vision statements can be more like a little bit more general in things, or they can be very specific, like we're fixing this problem in workplaces. Yes. Either way, that's the what, and the how you get there, I feel like, is the thing that shapes more of the culture, because we'll get people in the same mindset who want to get to whatever the end goal might be.
Right.
But if they can't agree on, or if they're on a different place of the values of how they're going to get there, that's the part where you're on, like the foundational parts of where you're on the same page.
Gotcha.
I think that really matters. And, there's a lot of buzzwords out there, and it's good, but also a big part of it is actually aligning or following the follow through, because we started with a lot of this talking about communities. So much of it is what you're communicating, consistency of that, and follow through of that. Because if I tell you, like, if I'm your friend and I'm going to say, I'm going to send you, this is a random, like, I'm going to send you a postcard every week. Great. I'm going to send you a postcard every week. That's what I'm communicating. Consistency. Maybe I send one to you every week for like a couple months, and then I get tired, and then I don't send anything to you for like a month or two. Right. And then I send you another postcard and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot. And then I don't send you anything for a year. Yeah. So it's communication, consistency, and follow through. Because if I don't follow through, like, you start to lose trust. Like, it's not, I'm not doing what I say I'm doing or I'm going to do. Right. And, so that's also a thing of, whatever you're going to promise or list or say you're going to do, you should do or follow or align with. Exactly. So those, like, I think that the values definitely can absolutely support the culture of a company or whatever's happening, if they're actually followed through with.
Understood. No, understood. Thank you for sharing that insight, Lauren. Really, really, really appreciate it. It makes a lot of sense. So how can the listeners connect with you and learn more about the great work that you're doing?
I have many things I like to do and I'm doing. If you're a person who's on Twitter, it's me, Lauren Yee. You can follow me there. I also have two separate websites, because there's one of me, which is cultivatorofcuriosity.com. I run workshops and do some other lo-fi coaching and things like that, because I want to help people. But then also, we mentioned another company that I have going on, which is called This Us Now. And it's thisusnow.com. And we work with small businesses, and we focus and specialize in information and joy to help make you better. We just want to do that in lots of different ways. And you can check out that website. Those are the main places you can find me.
Beautiful, beautiful. We will make sure and have direct links to each of those social mediums, websites, in our episode show notes. So for all the listeners, be sure to look out for these links in the episode show notes so that you can connect and learn more about Lauren Yee. Lauren, this has been a wonderful conversation. I've learned so much insight from you regarding building community and culture, and how to use and leverage curiosity to solve problems, right? To leverage curiosity to overcome obstacles. So thank you so much for sharing that, Lauren. I'd like to go into a segment that I call 3 for the Road, okay? And in 3 for the Road, that's where I ask my guests 3 random yet thought-provoking questions that I challenge you to answer in 5 words or less. So what do you think? You think you're up for it?
I am excited. I'm going to try to use less words than I usually do.
All right, fantastic. I know you'll just knock this one out of the park. And by the way, these are not cookie cutter questions. I customize my questions for all of my guests based on their specialty.
Oh, great. Right. I'm excited. I'm only a little scared.
Which is a healthy thing. Okay, great. So here we go with question number 1 for 3 for the Road. What can animals teach us about community?
Ooh. What can animals teach us about community? I'm going to go with it's an ecosystem.
Nice. That's 3 words.
I was like, that's less. I was like, don't stop talking. Yeah. Too many words.
It's an ecosystem. Love it. Love it. All right. Question number 2. I'm drawing a scenario for you. Okay.
Okay. Ready.
You are the queen of the world. And as part of establishing a global culture, you set into law 3 foods that is eaten globally. What are they?
Ooh, 3 foods globally. Rice, it goes with everything. Pizza, because it's my favorite. And ice cream? Something sweet.
Gotta have dessert. That's a good balance. So rice, because it goes with everything. Pizza, which happens to be my favorite food too, Lauren.
This is why we get along.
It is, totally. And then ice cream, of course. You got to have something cool and sweet to wash it down with, right?
Of course.
Digging it. 100%. Awesome. You are knocking this out of the park, Lauren. Question number 3 to top us off for 3 for the road. Can multiple cultures coexist in the same environment?
Yes, with a level of understanding.
Okay, I'm digging it. Yes, with a level of understanding. That says a lot, and it really drives the point home about cultures coexisting. So, Lauren Yee, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've had a thrill. I've had a blast. Let's stay in touch, okay? I'd love to have you back on the show, 6 months from now or so, to where we can update the listeners on, any new projects or efforts you're working on. Is that okay?
That sounds great. It's been a pleasure, and I'd love to come back.
Right on. Thank you so much, Lauren. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening. Like I mentioned earlier, we'll be sure to leave links to all the websites and social mediums that Lauren has mentioned in the episode show notes. A friendly reminder for you, if you could please subscribe, rate, and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Libsyn, or wherever you get your shows, it would really, really mean so much to me. Also, and very, very, very much more important, if you know someone struggling through dark times, dark days, and they seem to be at the end of their rope, I ask that you please share this podcast with them. Please. The Road to Rediscovery, it's a movement, a revolution. And guess what? You are now part of it. We're all roadies in this journey of life, and it sure feels good having you on the journey with me. Thanks again for listening. We'll chat again soon.
The Road to Rediscovery is an AJ Shark production.